Hello there, people of the internet. This video is going to upset so many people. Alright, so, bolt-action rifles of World War II. I was going to say, let's talk about the best rifle of World War II, but of course it's going to go to the M1 Garand self-loading rifle that's given to everybody. It really was a fantastic rifle for the time period. But best bolt-action rifle of World War II, this is where the arguments and discussions get a little bit more interesting. So, like I said, this is going to make some people upset. This right here is something that is going to definitely cause some controversy because people have such intense biases towards one thing or another, and those biases stop them from looking at, the practicality and actual rationale behind why things were made and used the way that they were. Alright, so, my opinion. The best bolt-action rifle of World War II is probably going to be the M38 Carcano rifle. Carcano, however it is you want to pronounce it. As long as you know what I'm saying, I really don't care how it's pronounced. So, the M38 Carcano. This right here is Italy's rifle, chambered in a 7.35 Carcano. That is a 30 caliber round. And ballistically speaking, it's got about the same effectiveness as a 7.62 by 39. For the purposes of the rifle, it has roughly the power of an intermediate cartridge, and the cartridge, along with some simplicity designs of the rifle, are exactly why I think this is such a fantastic rifle for the time period. So the big problem with full power rifle cartridges is their full power rifle cartridges. Logistically speaking, back in the day, those full power rifle cartridges needed to be powerful enough to be able to take care of things like airplanes and vehicles and things that weren't necessarily just soldiers that were on the battlefield. And for logistical simplicity, you issued the soldiers and the machine guns that were taking care of most of the stuff the same cartridge. So the soldiers had full power cartridges because those full power cartridges were used in those machine guns as well. So rather than make two kinds of ammo, just give everybody the same kind of ammo. The issue is, whenever this concept was adopted and most of these cartridges were adopted, like say 30-06, 8mm, etc., that was around the 1890s, 1900s, that time period there, and most people were rocking pretty good sized long length rifles. Well, come after World War I, going into World War II, a lot of countries were transitioning into shorter rifles. So those full power rifle cartridges, and a lot of those shorter length rifles, the gunpowder didn't really burn off all that effectively, and you would get just massive concussive muzzle blasts coming out the end of those things. You get a row of soldiers with that going on, and suddenly nobody can hear anything. Of course, I guess it's kind of dwarfed by the artillery that's going on around you, but bottom line is it's not the most efficient way to be able to do things. You get a shorter, handier rifle, but the cartridge stays the same because that's what they're using. It just does not work out. The Italians actually went from a 6.5 round to a larger 7.35 round, or at least they tried to. World War II kind of put an immediate stop to that. So the Italians did not quite get their way with this rifle, but if they really were able to get this rifle up into full swing, then it would have been a really, really good option. So the intermediate cartridge was good because you had the lack of recoil, lack of concussive blast. It was lighter weight than a lot of other cartridges that were out there being used by other militaries, and it was still effective enough to be able to handle most things that most of your soldiers would need to handle. Not only that, but we got ourselves a nice, short, handy, lightweight little rifle. As a matter of fact, I'm over here holding this up with one hand so I can show you guys on the camera. These did take a bayonet, got a bayonet lug right there, so if the Italians found themselves in a situation where they were needing a bayonet, they had the means to be able to use it. One of the big things about the 7.35 M38 is that there was a lot of simplifications with the rifle, including our rear sight right here. The rear sight, that right there is one of the more expensive versions, well, the more expensive piece on basically all rifles to make. That's what slows down production a tremendous amount because calibrations have to be made. Everything has to be made to exact specifications. Just the adjustability of the sight, everything's got to be tightened properly on that sight so the sight doesn't move around or get loose under fire, or there's a lot that goes into making a rear sight. Well, the Italians noticed that most combat was taking place between like 200 and 400 yards, so they set a 200-yard battle sight on their M38s, and that was good enough. If you're shooting farther, you're going to hit a little bit lower. Shooting closer, you're going to hit a little bit higher. But for the most part, that right there was good enough to hit a man-sized target at most of the distances that combat was taking place at, and it saved a tremendous amount of time and effort and machine work whenever it came to the machining of rear sights. Now, there are other rifles out there that utilize that fixed rear sight. Like, I know the Japanese last-ditch rifles, they also had a fixed rear sight on them. But the Japanese rifles, the reason why those last-ditch rifles are not on my best rifles of World War II list is they were incredibly crude, which really is not that big of a deal. It's mostly a cosmetic issue, but they also fired the 7.7 Jap, which is not an intermediate cartridge at all. That is a full power rifle round. It's a serious big round. Like, it's comparable to the 30-06 that the United States was using at the time, which was M2 ball. That's a quite powerful round in comparison to the 735 Carcano. So that is why I chose this over that Jap round. The British actually used a simplified version of their rear sight as well. It was a really, really simple two-piece flip notch system, and they also had a 10-round magazine. Well, they also were using full power rifle cartridges, which is, like I said, not necessarily the most efficient thing to use in a squad rifle, a infantry firearm, like the standard shoulder firearm of your forces. Not the most efficient thing to use, especially as your firearms get shorter and shorter, but of course the Enfield series did not get that short. Whenever they did, it was after World War II, and they had the jungle carbines. They put a flash hider on the end of it, so that's a topic for another time. That was later on after the war. But the British did use a simplified version of their rear sight, which saved them a lot of machine time. But they also used full power rifle cartridges, and they were rimmed cartridges, so not all that good of a time. Anyone who's ever dealt with rim lock knows that it can be quite annoying. And for the people who tell me rim lock doesn't exist, having fired these rifles for a tremendous amount of time over my years, I've had rim lock on multiple occasions. So yes, it absolutely does exist. The Carcano is also a dramatically simple action and whatnot to produce. The bolt itself is one solid piece. The locking lugs are on one solid piece. The bolt body is one solid piece. The actual bolt, the handle that attaches to the bolt body, that's not a separate piece like it is on some rifles that just kind of screw into it. It just increases simplicity of the rifle by a tremendous amount. Now, of course, the bolt is not just one complete solid piece. We're not saying that this is like an open bolt SMG. It definitely has some complicated features to it, but in comparison to some other rifles, it is quite simple. Like, for example, the Mauser. The Mauser has a very, very simple action as well, especially if we're talking about the Mauser 93 pattern. But the Mauser 98 was the most common rifle of Mauser that was being used in the Second World War, and it was definitely a way more complicated to produce system than the Carcano bolt. There's a reason why these right here are designed the way that they are. They also use the in-block clip system. Anyone who's ever fed from stripper clips knows that some stripper clips work great. You just put them in the top of the rifle, push it down, and sometimes it works fantastic, and other times you gotta absolutely fight that thing in order to get those rounds into your rifle. The inconsistency of loading with stripper clips is something that can cause issues, especially under stress, versus something like an in-block clip like the Carcano uses, where it is consistent all the way through. So that is another big perk for the Carcano rifles. So all in all, because of those reasons that I stated, that is why I would say this right here is the best bolt-action rifle of World War II. Intermediate cartridge, very simple to produce, very fast to produce. These rifles, they were able to shell out quite a few of them, even though they were only making them for a couple of years. A lot of these got given to Finland as war aid whenever they were fighting the Russians. So a lot of them are going to have an SA property stamp on them somewhere. In this case, mine is right there. But, of course, that is not the case for all of the rifles. Excellent cartridge, excellent rifle, excellent concept. Of course, Italy would kind of degrade their capabilities with rifles as they produced, I think it was the M41, but that's a topic for another video. This is my 2 cents on this subject, and I'm sure somebody's going to be upset with me. Thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you all in the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.